Conversations with the Carters, 2016.
I have to make a living.
Well, then we'll move to Mrs. Carter. This question starts out by saying, thank you for your work on mental health. Oftentimes lawmakers say they cannot fund the mental health system because they don't have the money. How accurate do you think that sentiment is?
They could do it if they wanted to. They just don't have mental health as a priority. Mental health affects the everyday lives of so many people in our country who could work if they had treatment. It would help their economy so much, and hopefully are on the way to addressing the problem. I'm not sure. It takes so long for anything about mental health to be passed by Congress. Anything that concerns mental health. The mental health, I had in my Mental Health System Act, which was a bill that got passed when Jimmy was president, I had parity, I had incentives for people to go into the mental health profession, I had integration of services, things that we still haven't gotten all of the things that I had in my bill passed. The incoming president put it on the shelf, and it never took effect. But so much of it was done anyway by the states, but still it's very difficult. It takes a long time to move forward. Actually, we got the parity bill passed in 2008, and it was not implemented until 2014. Anyway, and it's still not working right because it was not implemented for so long that the insurance companies just started doing what they assumed or what they made out that the bill did. So anyway, I get upset when I'm talking about it.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter. President Carter, this question comes from, or President and Mrs. Carter, actually. This question comes from an 8th grader who goes to Inman Middle School. The question is, how can young people like myself help stop racism?
Well, when I was that age, I was immersed in a system of total racial segregation. And I was influenced by the people around me, like this young man is now. And luckily, I lived in a community where our family was only white people there. And all my playmates and people that worked with me in the field were African Americans. And fortunately, my mother didn't believe in racial segregation. She was a registered nurse, and she nursed in the homes of our very poor African American neighbors. As a matter of fact, in those days, she worked 20 hours a day for $6. That was what they were supposed to pay her when they could. And so she didn't get off work until 10 o'clock at night, and she had to go back to work at 2 o'clock in the morning. And she would take care of the family. That was what the registered nurses did. So I was lucky enough, when I was young, like this questioner, to see the wonderful side of our African American neighbors and get to know them intimately. And so when I wrote a book about my young life, An Hour Before Daylight, I tried to express in the last chapter the 5 people who, in addition to my own parents, shaped my life. Of those 5 people who shaped my entire life, only 2 of them were white. The other 3 were African Americans. And so my life has still been shaped, in my opinion, and so forth, by African Americans. So I would say that for any young person asking the same question is to get to know as many people of opposite races as you possibly can. And if they're in your classroom, they can invite them to your house. And maybe their parents as well, and the same thing with going to their houses. This week we'll have a meeting here of what's called the New Baptist Covenant, which I helped to begin in several years ago in 2008. And its main subject, this will be after tomorrow, will be to encourage predominantly white churches to reach across sometimes just one street to their African American neighbors who share their faith and have joint programs, maybe with young people every year, or invite the opposite pastor to come in your church, or invite the choirs back and forth, things like that. So I think the main answer to the question would be to reach out to people who are not like you in a very positive way and get to know them intimately, and the more you know them, you'll see that they're just as good as you are, and just as smart as you are, and just as ambitious as you are, and their family values are just as good as yours.
I tried to think of an answer, but I don't know. I think what I usually tell young people and children would be the same, that let people know that you care about them, and we'll have a better world. I think maybe the children hopefully believe us. And they already are. They go to school and they get to know them, and I think they hopefully going to lead the way.
President Carter, what challenges do you foresee for Colombia as a nation in implementing the peace agreement, and what action do you recommend its citizens take at this point?
Well, as I said earlier, this is a very difficult decision for many Colombians to make, and two previous presidents, including the most recent former president, has come out adamantly against a peace agreement. So it's going to be a tough fight in which we'll be on the peace side to get a majority of the Colombians to approve the peace agreement. And President Santos, who's done the heroic work of negotiation, is now responsible for that plebiscite to be held honestly and fairly, and we'll be there to help with that. But it's a matter of the people in Colombia choosing peace instead of recommencing of the long-standing war and revolution. We'll be just giving the advantages of peace and trying to understand what goes on there, making sure there's an honest and fair vote. So, and that'll take place very soon. As a matter of fact, I think it's scheduled for October the 2nd. Does anybody know different than that?
That's correct, sir.
October 2nd. So you see, it's just a couple of weeks from now. In fact, it'll be the day after my birthday.
Oh, I wasn't going to ask this one right now, but there is a question here. The questioner wants to know, sir, how do you plan to celebrate your 92nd birthday on October 1st?
I'm going to stay home with my wife. And she may not gather from the night. We get along quite well when we're home. But I'd rather, whenever Rose and I go off somewhere, like in San Francisco or wherever, and we have our main wish is to go back home to Plains, where the others waiting for us and we're supposed to be together in solitude. We have a lot of our children and grandchildren visit us there. So Plains has always been a haven for us, and to get back there, I think would be my hope. I was scheduled to go to Hong Kong on the first day of October to accept a very large award that's being made to me called the Senate, but I've asked my middle son to go and accept the award for us. It'll be 20 million Hong Kong dollars, which is a pretty good size award. I'm grateful for it. But between going over there and getting the award and being at home with my wife, I decided to be at home with her.
Sir, I could not ignore all the questions about the most obvious topic, that would be the U.S. elections. Here's one. If you were to moderate a debate between the two presidential candidates, already an interesting premise, what would be the most important question that you would ask and why?
Well, I saw what happened to Matt Lauer when he made this attempt a couple of weeks ago. I think the main thing is to reach out to the public, which most of them do, and get questions in advance that are quite probing and really tap the desire of average American citizens to know questions to be answered by the president. So I would do that and get a list of those like you all send sometimes now on Twitter and so forth. But I think the main thing would be to see how closely, this is a very biased question of mine. I would see how each one of them feels about peace and human rights. And I would guess, the reason it's personal is when I became president, made my inaugural speech, that was my main subject. I promised that our country, if I was possible, a successful president, would stay at peace. And that we would honor human rights. And it would be hard to imagine either one of the two candidates making that speech next January. But I think I'd like to know how they feel about overcoming the present dissensions and violence and abuse that's sometimes part of the United States policy, and what they would do to bring about peace and human rights. I think it would be an embarrassing question to them because they haven't talked about that during the campaign. It's mostly about how we'll stay at war and how much we'll discriminate against other people and things like that. But I don't think I can think of a better answer right now.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Carter, the Carter Center champions mental health initiatives. What should be done to help the 20 veterans a day that the VA estimates are taking their own lives?
I wish I knew. We talk a lot about that mental health program about suicide and the tragic what's happening. And I don't have an answer for it. I think the VA is doing better now than it was for a while. And hopefully, but I think the Veterans Administration is trying harder now, but it's just a tragedy. And it's lack of services. I wish I knew how to. They could be treated for depression, they could be treated for anything, but they stand in line sometimes and don't go for help. If we could just lift the stigma so that veterans coming home would feel safe going to get help. That would do more than anything, I think, because so many don't try to get help because they don't want to admit they have problems. I think lifting the stigma would do so much. People don't go because they don't want to be associated with the illness, which is tragic because today the overwhelming majority of people living with mental illness can lead good, fulfilling lives in their communities. And people don't know that. And so many people don't know that. I've worked on it for 45 years this year. Started when George got in 1971. And worked on stigma for 45 years. And it's beginning to lift a little bit.
I think one of the things that the government could do would be to clean up the bureaucracy that is the Veterans Administration, which is kind of a recent development. It hadn't always been that way. And secondly, I think the government could finance mental health treatment, not only in veterans hospitals, but also let any veteran who can't get almost immediate care in a veterans hospital, let them have the funds through the Veterans Administration to go to private psychiatrists or other treatment. So there's some practical reasons.
I have a program at the Rosen Carter Institute for Caregiving for veterans' families. We try to help veterans, and veterans, as I said, won't come forward. And we had developed an evidence-based program for people dealing with Alzheimer's, and they don't come forward either. And so we began to go in their homes. And so we switched our program, and Lisa, who's head of that program, is here today. We began to go into the homes and talk to the families. We don't talk to the veteran, but it's much easier for the family to accept our help. And we have a telephonic program if anybody knows someone with dementia that they need help with. You can call the Rosen Carter Institute at our local state university, Georgia Southwestern, and you can get help free of charge on the telephone. And it's a really good program, and
again, I'm quite prejudiced. You know, I have my oldest son and his oldest son are both lawyers. I left out lawyers deliberately. Not because of them, but I believe that anyone who wants to make a difference in the world has a major, if they chose public health would be the best way to serve many people in a somewhat sacrificial way. You can still get a fairly good income from being. We have some top-notch people in our Carter Center organization who are experts on public health, and I think that's the best I can do. I wouldn't derogate a school teacher and so forth. I wouldn't knock anybody else, but that's my own personal choice. Those are my different.
Thought I'd like to. We have so much interaction with the Centers for Disease Control and people in public health, and I have always thought, in another life, if I come back, I'll be a public health person.
Jason Baumgartner asks, how are you doing on your birding life list?
Well, we just recently passed 1,300 birds. So Rosa and I take a chance every time we go to a foreign country, in particular since we've got most of the birds around our area. We make arrangements ahead of time with the U.S. ambassador to find a bird specialist in that particular area. And so if we have our first meeting at, say, 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, we have plenty of time to go out and look for birds from daybreak until 8 o'clock. So it's a good way to expand our bird list. So Rosa and I took that up in 1988, I think it was. That was the year we went up Mount Kilimanjaro, and when we came down, we went to several parks, and our driver happened to be an ornithologist, so we got turned away from animals and toward birds, and we've been there ever since. So, I think 1,300, maybe 5 or something like that.
That's a large number. President and Mrs. Carter, how does your faith relate to your commitment to the Carter Center and other organizations you've worked with since your presidency?
Well, being the wife of the president, I have had a good chance to be involved with a lot of charities. And I think that Jimmy talks about his faith. He teaches Sunday school. I've always been very quiet. I like for people to think that I'm doing good and living like I have faith in God. And I do. And as I said, I've had good chances to be of help. And I think growing up in Plains, Georgia, well, everybody helped everybody else. When they were growing up, everybody went to church. I was brought up that way. And so it has sustained me through the good times and some of the bad times in my life.
I think a practical way to correlate the moral and ethical standards of the great religions was attempted one time in human history, and that was shortly after the Second World War, when we formed the United Nations to maintain peace, and it has not been successful, as you know. But a few years later, with the help of Eleanor Roosevelt and others who went to San Francisco for this purpose, and also to France, they passed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is very brief paragraphs, which I would urge you to look up on your internet, if you don't mind. It wouldn't take you very long, and just read it over. And that was a distillation of all the top moral and ethical values of the great religions of all of them. Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Hinduism and so forth. And so that was the foundest expression of what people ought to do for each other and how governments ought to treat its people that has ever been written. And we have basically abandoned a major part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the last 15 years. And tragedy. There have been some international agreements made. As you know, the so-called Geneva Convention established the guidelines for the way people treat prisoners in war and that sort of thing. And the United States publicly disavowed the Geneva Convention. So when the United States lowers its standard on human rights, it has a deleterious or bad effect on the rest of the world, because human rights abusers who are looking at Washington and say that we don't honor human rights, they say, well, I can get away with abusing my own people with impunity. So I would say that if you want to be a good Catholic or Protestant or Muslim or Hindu or Jew or whatever, and honor your religion, the best way is to try to implement in your own life in a very practical, secular way the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be the final question, and it's one we haven't touched on. With the release of the movie Snowden this weekend, what comments would you like to make about personal privacy versus constitutional protections? Privacy and constitutional protections versus lack thereof.
What question would what answer would I like to give?
What yes. What would you like to say?
I think if we make a mistake, it ought to be on the side of personal freedom. I don't like the idea of government intrusion into the private affairs of our own people. When I was president, we passed a law that prevented the government from making any intrusion into the private communications of American citizens. And we set up a board made up of distinguished judges, and before the Justice Department or any police official could get permission to listen to a private telephone conversation, for instance, or an email, which didn't exist then, they had to get permission from this judicial panel. And after 9/11, the President George W. Bush, and the Congress had the law that I passed modified to permit, in a very hazy way, the government to do this. So I just assume now that when I send an email, it's monitored by the government. And if I make a telephone call, I just assume that the government knows what I say. And I think that anybody in this audience has pretty much the same problem. If you want to stay private, you just almost have to talk person to person with somebody. So I think that we make a mistake by having government interfere in our personal communications too much. I can understand the arguments made on the other side, which are prevailing now in the Congress, and that is that we need to monitor, say, 2 billion telephone calls a year, because there might be some terrorists from overseas that are calling to talk about another act of terrorism. I can understand the opposite point of view, but I think that can still be controlled by the court that I said originally. So let us have our own personal freedoms.